Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys are having a good day, and I hope you're ready to learn how to use Swift 4 to build out your iOS 11 applications. Now in today's video, what I really wanted to go through is an introduction to how to use auto layout kind of programmatically for your iOS apps. Now, I know many of you guys out there are probably more used to using Storyboard and Interface Builder, right? But sometimes you just have to dive a little bit lower into the code in order for you to make your applications look like how your designers would like them to look like. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is the iPhone X, the iPhone 10 simulator, and you can find the simulator if you're using Xcode 9, which is currently in GM release version. And this application right here is pretty, it's a pretty typical app that allows you to walk through a couple of pages of this guide or tutorial walkthrough, whatever you want to call it. And the way that all of these elements are being placed on the screen, you know, this image up here, this label, and these controls at the bottom, it's all done programmatically using auto layout and the anchoring system that's always been available since, I believe, iOS 9 and above. So the nice thing about auto layout is that it handles orientations for you as well. So what I mean is if you rotate the screen landscape to the right or to the left, all of the views should be placed in its correct positions according to how you anchored it. So this image right here, you notice if you rotate it back like that, it's a lot bigger in portrait, but because the height of this screen now is much smaller than the width of the screen, it knows how to just adjust its height and size accordingly. And just like that little element above, we have these controls on the bottom, previous UI page control, and the next button. That also knows how to bring itself down to the bottom so that it also doesn't hit this little bottom indicator as well. So all of this stuff is being handled through auto layout just magically for you. And if you rotate it back to the screen, this is what you get. So I wanted to show you guys how to build out this style of application. It's pretty easy to do so programmatically, and using auto layout is something that you have to learn if you want to progress to becoming a better iOS developer. So why don't we go ahead and dive into the code right now. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started with Xcode 9 right here. And upon creating this single view application through the template, you get this view controller class, which allows you to immediately run it by using the play button on the top left. You're going to see me using Command R to run my code because obviously it's a lot faster. I'm really used to just hitting Command R. And upon running, you get your app with this white background. So this is a really good start for us to start modifying the app. And inside of view controller's viewDidLoad function, this is pretty much our entry point. So here's our entry point into our app, and we can start modifying the application to be whatever we want it to be. So for example, if I wanted to change the background color to something, instead of white, we want yellow. Upon doing that, I'm going to hit Command R to run, and this is going to launch the entire app again with a yellow background. So wait for it, and there we go. So pretty straightforward and pretty easy to do. Let me just comment that out by hitting Command and this slash, I think it's a forward slash, maybe a backslash. And so let's say we want to go a little further into the development cycle of our application code, and we want to place this image in the top section of the application. So the way to do that is to first grab a hold of the asset with this bear icon and place it into your assets folder. I think this is called an assets catalog. And the way I'm going to do that is to just drag this image in there. So this image is just a PNG file, looks like that. And upon dragging it in, you get access to this image like so. Now, I'm not going to talk about what 2x and 3x means. You don't really need to know about that for this video. And when you have that asset inside of your folder over there, you can get a hold of this bare image by just typing it out. And this right here is just your image. So in order to get it into your screen, you should use something called an image view. So let's say I have an image view. I create it programmatically like this and use this constructor of UI image. So I'm going to go ahead and type in the bear icon like that. And then I'm going to add it into my application. So right now it's just this blank yellow screen. I'm going to get rid of the yellow color like that, and then say view add subview of this image view. So I'm going to run this code now. It's going to compile everything and launch that app one more time. So I noticed the simulator is a little slower in Xcode 9. Not exactly sure why, but upon adding the image view, we get it kind of placed on the top left corner. So to modify the image view so that it's placed somewhere else, you can do something called setting a frame on it. So let's say we set the frame using imageView.frame equals some kind of CG rect. So this comes with a constructor of x, y, width, and height. So let's say we want to place 0, 0, and 50, 50 for the height. Now doing so, instead of getting this really large image in the corner, we get a smaller image of just 50 and 50 with height. So that's going to look something like this all the way in the top left corner. So obviously that's not where we want to place the image, and instead we want to place it somewhere in the center. Now to get it in the center, you can do some math calculations with the width of the frame of the image and then decide how large the entire view controller's width is, but that's kind of complicated. So this is where auto layout comes into play. Now in order to use auto layout, all you have to do is set some anchors on your image view. So let's say I want to center it horizontally into the screen. I can say center X anchor, and you want to constrain it onto something. So I'm going to use equal to some kind of other anchor. And this anchor is going to be the entire view controller's view and using its center anchor as well. So I'm going to say view center X anchor, and that centers it horizontally for us. Now let's say we want to center it vertically as well. Well, it's very similar, but instead of using center X anchor, we'll use center Y anchor, view dot center Y anchor, like so. All right, so now that you've placed it in the center of the entire view controller's view, which should be somewhere right here, you need to also tell it what the width and height values are. Otherwise, it's not going to know how to place it properly inside of the view controller. So to specify the width and the height, you can say image view dot width anchor, that's what it's called. And let's just constrain it equal to some kind of constant. So if we use the same value of 50, that should be okay. We do the same thing for the height. So let's constrain it to some kind of constant of 50 as well. So upon setting these 4 constraints up like this, you can run the application, but you're not going to see the image view anywhere inside of your view controller. Well, actually you see in the top left because all of these constraints are not what we call active yet. So what it's doing is pretty much just adding it into the view controller's view like we had before. So to enable all of these constraints, you have to do 2 things, which is first, you have to set this property called translates auto resizing mask into constraints. You have to set this to false. So this enables auto layout for our, I guess our view or our image view. And then right here, down on the bottom, you have to activate all of these constraints. And there's a couple of ways of doing this. I actually like using the isActive approach. Just set all of these properties equal to true. So I'm just going to paste and paste. And now I'm going to run the code. It's going to place this image view with 50 width, 50 height directly in the center of our view controller. So let's just wait for it to show up, and it should be in here like so. So that's obviously really small. I'm going to set it to 200 instead so I can see it a little better. It makes it a little bit more legible inside of this video recording. And it's going to run, and we're going to see a much larger image like so. All right, so that's really, really good stuff. And seeing what our application looks like right here, we don't really want to place the image view directly in the center in terms of the Y, the vertical axes. Instead, we want to place it closer to the top somewhere. So I'm going to place it about, let's say 100 pixels from the top. And what that means is I'm going to comment out the center Y anchor. I'm going to use a top anchor instead. So let's just say image view dot top anchor I'm going to constrain it to something, and also I'm going to use this constant value. So equal to some kind of anchor, and the constant is going to be the padding. So let me show you what that does by using the view controller's view top anchor. And let's say I want to place it 100 pixels or 100 point pixels from the top. And let's just activate this by isActive equals to true. And so running this now, we've pretty much told the image view to be placed anchored at the top of the view controller's top anchor like that. And then we want to constrain it so that it is 100 pixels from the top. So that's how that works. And the 100 pixels is actually starting from this top notch area and not the top of the status bar. So you have to be very careful with the iPhone 10 and its new safe area layout guides, but that's kind of how that works. So that's how you get this to be placed in the top area of your application, which kind of looks like that. Now, the way that we're handling the rotation is a little different. So I'm going to show you how to do that perhaps a little later. So let's go back to this app. And what I mean is if you rotate this, it's still really large and 100 pixels from the top. So that's kind of how our application looks like right now. And in order to avoid all of this code being placed inside of view.load, you can do a couple of different things. So what I mean is I want to construct this image view. Actually, I want to place it outside of view.load. So the way to do that is to, let's say, let's avoid polluting view.load. I think that's how you spell polluting. And construct this image view. So I'm going to say bare image view equals, or be of type UI image view, and let it equal to this curly brace thing. So this curly brace is a closure. So let's just say curly braces is referred to as closure or anonymous, I guess anonymous functions. Go ahead and look that up. You'll have a better understanding of it. But in this closure, we can execute some code. So I'm going to say let image view equals UI image view. Use the image constructor again, call bare first for my image, and just return this image view. Now, in order to execute this closure brace thing, you need to call the closure with these two parentheses. And upon doing that, you get your image view equal to whatever you have set up inside here. So I'm trying to build and get rid of that error. It should go away. And that's what we get. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and remove some of this code here, some of these comments that I don't want. Remove that frame. And instead of using this image view, I'm going to call bare image view for that instead, and just replace all of these image views down here. I think I should be okay. So you can run this now, you'll get pretty much the same thing as you had before, but instead your view.load code is a little cleaner. So we have our bare image up there, and we can also move this into this constructor as well. So let's place that in there, use image view instead, because this is what we're referring to. And then that also cleaned up our view.load. So this is the reason why I place all of my properties above like this. It keeps your code a lot cleaner and it's really tidy. So when you come back to your code in a couple of weeks, you can still read what it does. All right, so this is our kind of a setup code for the UI. And I'm going to say setup UI or setup layout. And then this layout function I'm going to include down below. So let me get some extra space down here. And let's say I have this private function down here called setup layout. Make sure the brace is on the same line. I can copy all of this code and just place it in here. And why don't I remove that center Y anchor, because I don't really need it. And then there we go. I can run my app now. And all of my code is neatly packed away into separate functions. And you should really follow this pattern if you want to keep your code clean. And the reason is because when someone else looks at your code, it's much easier to read when they can isolate the function code into separate little chunks of lines like this right here. So minor detail, but you want to make sure you keep your code concise. So that's what we need to do to execute all of this layout code. And in order to get the text view underneath the application right here, we can do a couple of things. I'm going to construct this text view and place it about 100 pixels, or maybe a little bit more, underneath the bare image view. So to follow this same pattern, we can create that view right here. So this is going to be a text view. A lot of you guys are used to using UI labels, but it doesn't exactly work correctly. So I'll show you guys why a little bit later on. Okay, so let me go ahead and create the text view up here by calling it perhaps a description text view. Let it be a UI text view and set it to be equal to some kind of closure again. And you want to make sure you call this closure at the very end. So inside of this closure, let's specify the text view that we are going to create by constructing a brand new text view. And just use the empty constructor is what this is called, and set the text view dot text to be something. So I'm going to use this text that says join us today in our fun and games. So let's say let it be of type string, join us today in our fun and games, exclamation mark, return this text view. And that's going to set the description text view to all of this information in here. So if I build my code, everything should be okay. You can hit Command B to build your code without running it. That way you can make sure that the errors go away and your code compiles fine. So if I want to place this description text view into my application, let me slide this up into this area down here. I will need to first add it into my view controller's view. So add subview of the description text view. And when you're inside of this view that loads scope, you have access to all of these view controller properties up here. So that's how this is able to compile. Okay, so how do I want to set up the layout? Well, let's go down to setup layout and place it down here. So it's very similar to how we place the bare image view into the view controller. And now we just want to set up 4 more constraints. So if you think about it a little bit, you always need 4 constraints to make sure your views are placed somewhere, because we have 2 dimensions and an XY location and a width and height. So let's say I want to place it below this bare icon. Let's use a top anchor. I think that should work. The top anchor of the description view will be constrained to the bottom of this bare image view. So bare image view dot bottom anchor, and the constant, let's just use the value of 150. It's going to push it down from the bottom of that image. So I guess we can set is active equals to true while we're here, or we can do it later. Doesn't really matter so much. And let's just use description text view again and set the left, right, or the width. So the way I like to set up my anchors for these types of views is to just completely use the left and right anchors. So you can use the left anchor like that and constrain it to be equal to the view controller's view dot left anchor. And you can either use the constant of 0 like that, or just completely get rid of it. There's actually 2 method calls, and this constraint is overloaded with 2 different types of calls. So I'm going to use the left anchor like so, and description text view dot right anchor. You can constrain this to the right anchor of the view controller's view. So right anchor like that. And then I'm going to say description text view, and I'm going to constrain this entire view all the way down to the bottom right here. So let's just say dot bottom anchor of the description text view, constrain it to, let's use this one, view dot bottom anchor, and the constant, let's just use a value of 0 perhaps. I think that should work out for me. And to make sure all of these constraints are activated, you have to make sure it is active indeed. Now, I don't believe we're going to see the actual description text view. It might be placed up there somewhere. So, yep, kind of like what I expected. We don't see it because we haven't enabled the auto layout using this property right here. So let me just go back up to description text view, change text view dot translates auto resizing mask into constraints and set it to false. And hopefully this is going to make my description show up in the app. It's always a little tricky when you forget these properties and you kind of use a lot of time and you spend a lot of waking hours trying to debug why it doesn't show up. But nonetheless, that's what you have to do. So you see join us today is somewhere right here and is placed 150 pixels away from this image. So that's a little farther than I would hope it to be. So I'm going to change description text view bottom anchor. Let's just say 120. And I'm going to bold the text right there. So the way to do that is to use TextView.font. Yeah, there we go. UI font, bold system font. I think I have it set to 18 in the other app. And then I want to center it as well. So let's say TextView.alignment, text alignment equals dot center like that. We should get the autocomplete. And the reason why you get the autocomplete for text alignment is because this property right here, let me just show you what it is after it compiles, and that's what it looks like. So if you command click into this and you can jump to the definition, I suppose, you see that it is of type NS text alignment. And if you command click into that and you go into the definition, you see that it has a couple of cases and it's actually type enum, which is an enumeration. And that means that it can only be of a couple of different types. Left, center, right, justified, and natural. So you really only have 5 options to set up this text alignment thing. And if you try to set it to something else, it just will not compile. So let's say ABC, try to build, that doesn't work. So that's kind of how enumerations work, and it makes your code much easier to follow if someone else were to look at it. So that's kind of how the auto layout system works for this entire application right now. So the last thing I want to fix is, you see how when I tap into the text view, you get this keyboard to show up. The way to disable all of that functionality is to go back to the description text view and say is editable equals to false. I think that should work. And while you're here, you might as well set is scrollable enabled also equal to false. I find that most of the time I want to disable the scrolling when I'm using a text view. So that's kind of why I set those 2 properties to be false like that. And upon doing so, you can click this and you see you can highlight some of this stuff, but the keyboard never shows up. For the rest of the UI in this app, I want to issue a challenge for all of you that are watching to complete the code by yourself and give it a try. You want to make sure the layout fits for the portrait orientation as well as the landscape mode, kind of like what you're seeing on the screen. It might be a little difficult at first, but make sure to give an honest crack at it. Remember, if you want to download the source code for today's video, you can find the link down in the description below, and that's where you can actually download the bare icon image if you want access to that as well. So hopefully you picked up some tips and tricks on how to use auto layout programmatically. And if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and also consider subscribing to the channel. That's going to be it for me today. Keep on coding, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye, guys.